So I've pulled all the cockpit components for the 202 off all the sprues. I haven't really done any cleanup yet. It's just kind of in the best position possible to do some cleanup with some files, a couple knives. The parts are pretty good. The only piece I really found that had some issues is the floorboard of the cockpit in these like, there's like a, let's see if it focuses in here. These like footrests underneath the rudder pedals, there's 2 ejector pin marks on each one. So I'm either going to try to get in there with a rounded blade and try to smooth them out and see how it is, or what I might do is just go with some plastic hard and make an insert or a cover for it. If you look at reference photos, it actually looks like it's a, instead of it being this like rib detail around the edge, it looks like it's flat, completely flat with a little bit of a taper on the side. So I'll see how I can do about going in there and taking care of those ejector pin marks. There's also a couple under here, but those will be obscured by the seat. So this piece will need some work. And then I also removed the casting blocks off of the resin replacements. So this is the resin seat with the harness in there, as you can see. And then this is the resin replacement without the harness molded in. And we'll see how the photo etch will adapt into this piece. Other than that, I have my directions out for the Eduard photo etch set. I'm just kind of picking out. It's not an extensive set. So basically, the instrument panel, a couple things for the sidewalls, some wiring harness detail, and it's like rudder pedal stuff. So pretty easy, pretty simple photo etch set to get in there. And then as far as like plan color wise, I'm probably gonna base everything in some type of Alclad silver, and then do some chipping fluid on it, and then I will spray there's an actual dedicated interior green for the Italian Air Force, which is this Anticorrosiva. It's a very similar color to like U.S. interior green or British interior green. The cockpit from my reference photos is a combination of natural metal and the green color. So more on that when we get to it. So I'm going to go about here, get some of these parts prepared, and start adding the photo etch, and I'll kind of meet up with you in a minute. So this is the cockpit floor, and right now I was able to fill in and scrape out the ejector pin marks here, so they look okay. Got in the rudder pedals and this like some type of actuator on the side there. So that's ready to go. I did some test fitting. You can't see these 2 ejector pins there, but I scraped them out a little bit. This is one of the sidewalls that I added in. Photo etch here, photo etch here. Photo etch on the top part is actually colored photo etch, but it does not match the MRP color they have. So I took a picture of it so I know it looks like I have some little stencil decals that I can add to replace these. So it'll just get painted over so it's all one color. And then I added in a little bit of wire and this like hose detail I made out of lead solder and laid it in there. So that's all ready to go. There's one other piece of photo etch that is colored that's going to go here that has some dials and stuff on it, so I'll get added later. And then the other piece, sidewall, got this trim tab wheel, the throttle quadrant, this wiring harness, and there's another lever up here. I added some detail in here. Again, another color photo etch piece here that's going to get painted over. Added some brass rod in here to make the throttle, which is pretty prominent and big and silver. And then there's some photo etch knobs in the back there. So that's all ready to go to get painted. And then the photo etch instrument panel is several pieces. It is this piece here, which is like the framework for it. I don't know how well it's going to pick up on camera. But this is one piece that gets folded into this, like, you know, grid type, girder type thing. So that's the back part that actually drops into the cockpit itself. It's not coming up at all. Doesn't help that it's silver. So that's the first part of it. And then with 3 separate parts is the actual instrument panel itself, which, there you go. And there's also, you see the gray thing on the left top side, outside of that notch? That's part of the kit plastic that you put in there on a little mount. I think it's a compass. So this, then in turn, after this gets painted up, this silver piece, this goes and lays on top here and gets glued in. It's hard to do it on camera without getting my head in the way, but that'll get glued on top like this. Let me move this forward. This will get glued on top. The back will get all painted up black. And then there's one other piece that goes here, a photo etch. And then that wraps up that part. So far, this is what my photo etch tree looks like. I've used a good chunk of it. A lot of this small stuff will get added on later. The rudder pedals are supposed to have straps. I lost these. I lost all. They gave me 3. I lost all 3 of them. So I'm not doing those. Maybe I'll use some tape. But I need to put these little like toggle switches on the instrument panel, and then these leftover parts here are for the gun sight. And then this is part of the instrument panel. That's that piece that's going to go on the side. And then this is the photo etch harness, which this is the first time I've ever seen an Eduard set that is printed on both sides. I think that's pretty cool. Never seen that before. So that's if I'm going to use it in the in this seat, the one without. Oh, can't see this seat, this resin seat without the molded in harness. So I might give that a try later. But right now this one looks pretty good. So yeah, that's where we're at with the photo etch. I'm gonna give everything kind of a couple minutes to dry, make sure everything's in place. On the throttle quadrant here, I built up the knobs with some CA glue to give them kind of a rounded effect. So I want that to really cure out before I add any paint to it. So next up will be primer, some silver paint, and yeah, we'll be starting chipping and stuff. So catch up with you in a couple minutes. All right, so I did a little bit of clear up here, make sure everything is nice and neat as I get ready to paint. So what I do is I get some of this double-sided 3M tape and a couple popsicle sticks, and I attach parts on here so I can paint them. I know that this back area of the seat won't be visible, so I just put that down, and then I can paint all the rest of it and make sure it's all covered up. And they're easy to handle, so I have all the parts that need to get painted on the popsicle sticks here, and then this piece is on a locking set of tweezers, and then the inside side walls of the fuselage itself need to get painted. So that's all I need to paint for right now. So I'm gonna lay down some paper towels so I can protect my mat, and then we'll get painting. So we'll cover the painting process in a second. Okay, for paint here, I'm gonna start out with just a primer coat of this MRP Fine Surface Primer Black. This is just kind of good for, you know, this kind of small stuff. If I was doing some major paint, I would be using Mr. Surfacer, but since this is just cockpit work, I'm just going to use this. I just have a little bit left, so I just want to kind of eliminate this. After I do that, I will then add a chipping coat of Alclad C.202 aluminum. That will be the chipping base. Then I'll add some AK Warn effects, and then after that we'll spray on the actual cockpit green, and then we'll chip at it. So let me get the airbrush set up, and then we'll start going here. All right, so for just spraying down the primer, I'm using this Mr. Hobby PS771, and I'm shooting at the kind of a preset I have with the nozzles almost all the way open, just to get this stuff down. Okay, so I switched over to an Iwata HPCS, and in here is Alclad Aluminum, and this is thin 50/50 with Mr. Color Rapid Thinner, just so it lays down a lot smoother. I'm only really planning to chip up the floor and parts of the sides. The seat and the control column are in silver paint as is, so they won't get chipped up, but I'm just going to give everything a coat of this all over. All right, for part of the chipping, I'm going to do part of the chipping with the worn effects, mainly like the floor that's going to get most of the wear and tear, but I'm also going to use this Liquid Frisket by Graphics on a sponge, and I'm going to do parts of the sidewall because it's not going to be as, beat up as the floor, so I can actually control this a lot better than I can with the worn effects fluid and scrubbing on a brush. Plus, since there's a lot of photo etch and wire and stuff that I add in here, I'm kind of worried about scraping away at it. But all you really need to do to use this stuff is you get some a little bit on a sponge like this, dab some of it off, and then you can just kind of go in here and just tap, and it will leave a little bit of the residue from the frisket that you can then just peel off later. Once it dries relatively quickly too, so if you feel like you did too much, you can just wait for it to dry, peel it off, and then reapply. But this is a good way to do minor wear and tear, nothing too crazy. So I will work at this a little bit, add a couple areas in the cockpit that will get beat up a little bit. Okay, so now we're loaded up with some AK Worn Effects, and we're going to hit these parts in a couple coats. We'll hit them with a coat, dry with a hairdryer in between, do another coat, and then they should be good to go. I've mentioned this before in my last video. When you're spraying this stuff, if it starts to beat up on you, you're spraying it on too heavy. So you just kind of build it up. The hard thing is it is very difficult to see this clear liquid getting sprayed onto silver parts. So you just kind of gotta be careful with it as you go. This is already very hard to see if I'm nailing it or not. Doesn't help. My airbrush trigger is sticking as well. It's not good. So everything has gotten 2 coats of the AK Worn Effects. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to spray a very light coat of black over everything again to give me some false shadows for when I do paint on the interior green. So this is AMT6. We're just going to use this in a very, very light coat over all the parts that we're going to spray the interior green. Okay, so now we're spraying the interior green, which is this Italian Air Force Anticorrosiva. Okay, so for chipping what I'm going to do first is I'm going to go in and remove the spots where I had the Liquid Frisket, this stuff. And I mainly use that on the sidewalls because I wanted minor chipping there. And all you need to do with this is you can actually just run your finger on it, or since it's such a tight space, if you have some white tack, you can get a little bit ripped off here. And then I like to add it on to these, they're called sniper brushes by Ammo. You can twist them up on the edge here. And we'll see if I can actually show this on here. Just got to get it to lift a little bit, and it will start to chip the paint. So you can see right there, this little box had some stuff on it. Okay, so in the process of removing the Liquid Frisket, I tore that PE box off, so I had to re-glue it. And then I looked at my references, and that's ended up going to be black, so that'll get hand painted later, but I had to re-glue that back in. But I'm now going to start to work on the actual chipping fluid parts of it. So for that, I have my kind of like chipping brushes. What we want to do first here is we'll start with the floorboard, because that's going to get the heavier chipping. Now obviously you got to think about this. This area behind the seat, I don't think will be accessed so much, so we don't want to chip that, but we want to chip kind of this area. These foot rests are actually some type of aluminum or maybe steel, so those are going to get painted separately later. So we're just going to kind of focus in here and do the chipping in there. So we just want to get the surface nice and wet. And I know I've done chipping before in a few videos on my channel, so that's definitely more intense. I'm just going to kind of get this going here. And usually when I chip, I kind of need to get my head over it, so I'm going to probably end up blocking the camera. So what I'll do is I'm going to get this kind of going, and then I'll come back and I'll show you an update after I get it chipped. Okay, worked as for a little bit. You know, floorboard's pretty scuffed in. Parts of the sidewall as well. Probably I'm gonna have to go in with the sidewall with a little bit of silver pencil. I'm just too worried about busting up all this extra detail I added in photo etch and stuff. In the process, I kind of knocked some parts off, so I will go back and do some more chipping on that later with a pencil. But right now, I'm fine with the chipping. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to seal everything with a coat of semi-gloss, just to seal in, and so that the shipping fluid doesn't reactivate. And then it's getting late, so I'll probably start detail painting this tomorrow. So we'll pick up tomorrow with some detail painting. Okay, so I got the floorboard, and the sidewalls all detailed up. I'll bring them a little bit closer to get them focusing, but there's one side there, as you can see, some silver, some of that blue or black gray. This color for the oxygen bottle is a mixture of MIG, burnt iron, and matte silver to give it a little kind of off look. And then some dark blue for the oxygen bottle, some yellow for the wire, and then some black for these little boxes. The floorboard, I use that same mix of the dark iron and matte silver that I use for the oxygen bottle on these like footrest thing. If you look at reference photos, it looks like tarnished silver, so I think that gives it a good representation. And then I fixed up the chipping that I went a little bit too far into the primer, just with a little bit of ammo silver. And then on this side, with the throttle quadrant and the trim tab wheel, some more yellow. The throttle quadrant is silver, and then the trim tab has that black color, and then silver in the middle, and then there's like a red and green indicator on it. So I just kind of patched that in as best I could. It looks good from above where you'll see it. And then, yeah, I honed in a little bit of chipping. That wasn't complete. So those are done. So what's going to happen now is I'm going to give both these or all three of these gloss coat for some decals. I have some stencil stuff I can put in there to represent some stencil detail, and then it'll get gloss coated again, and then we'll get ready for weathering. But before I do that, I'm going to go paint up the seat and the instrument, or the control stick. Okay, so I got the seat and the control stick painted up. Pretty simple. Luckily, the resin is so well cast that it's just really easy to just kind of guide a brush in there. So this is just some khaki and cork Vallejo colors on the actual harness, and the little like dark brown part in the back is mahogany brown, leather brown, and then some of the khaki for some highlights around the edges. Some neutral gray, some black, some khaki, and then black on the top, and then this is the base Alclad. You know, sure, you're not going to see much of that from the top side like this when you're looking in the cockpit, but it does add some variety. It spices it up a little bit, but that's the control stick. So now, since everything's all painted, I'm gonna let it cure out for a couple 10-15 minutes, and then I'm gonna add a gloss coat over everything so we can move on to applying some decals. Okay, to detail up the cockpit with some placards, I use these Airscale cockpit placard decals. Now, I know this particular set says for Allied, but they're so small, if you look at them here, you can get away with using some of them in here. Okay, so I picked some of these out for specific areas of the cockpit, mainly for the instrument panel, the left sidewall and right sidewall. And there's a couple extras because since they are small, you tend to lose a couple in the process of applying them. So these are what I picked out. I'll go about applying them into the cockpit, and then since they are so small and tiny, I'm probably just gonna get in the way if I show you how to do it. So I'm just gonna go do it, and then I'll come back and I'll show you where things got applied at the end. It's probably about as far as I can go before it blurs out. So yeah, one here on this box, one here, and then on top, let's see if I can get this to focus. On this solar piece, there's these three right here that kind of mimic what the Eduard photo etch was doing that I painted over. So that's the right side, and then the left side with the throttle quadrant. I got this red one over here, this one on the side of the throttle quadrant, and that one. And then on the top of the throttle quadrant, if you come on, focus. I got three of them in here for the actual throttles in there. They look like labels. So it's looking the part. All right, getting back to it. We're getting ready to start the weathering of it inside the cockpit. So everything last night had a gloss coat of MRP super clear gloss. It's chilled overnight. It's been in this little art bin container that I keep my parts in. I work in an active garage, so the door opens and closes, people come in and out, so dust is not a friend of mine, so I tend to keep everything in these kind of boxes, or I have a ton of Stylrite plastic boxes that I keep larger items in as I work to keep it dust free, but that's kind of what's going on here. So yeah, everything looks like it's settled in pretty well, got a nice glossy surface on this stuff, everything's nice and protected. Just gonna get all this stuff out here. Yeah, so basically just these parts here and the seat need to get some wash. So for this, I'm gonna use ammo panel line washes. Probably gonna use these three. This is panel line wash blue gray. I'll probably use this on the seat and the control stick. This is ochre for sand camo. I'm going to use this to lay out some dusting on the floor and at the bottom of the sidewalls. And then this green brown will kind of be like the shadow color for everything else. After I get those down, I might go in with a little bit of oils or some pigments and just kind of dust it up a little bit. All right, so if you haven't used these ammo panel line washers, they're actually really kind of neat. There's some type of magic formula. Unlike typical enamel thinners, you really don't need to break out mineral spirits to clean this stuff up. It tends to just kind of rub off with cotton bud, or like one of these tiny micro brush type things. Especially in a tight area like this, it's really easy just to kind of let it apply over a gloss coat, so it kind of does its thing. It zips around through capillary action. Let it dry for 10-15 minutes, and then you can go ahead and just remove it with, like I said, one of these type of brushes or some cotton buds. I am going to be pretty precise with this, so I'm going to use a precise brush. This is a Tamiya high finish brush, item 87048. It is quite a little tiny brush, but like I said, I just want it to be precise and go where I want it to go and not have to have a ton of cleanup afterwards, even though these are easy to clean. I'm probably going to focus on the sidewalls first with the darkest color, and then I'll end up on the floorboard with the sand color. So, like I said, pretty simple to use. I have a couple stainless steel ball bearings in here. When this stuff sits for a while, the wash separates. So, and even when you're applying it tends to separate pretty quickly. But just give it a good shake. Let those washers do its job. Crack this open. And let's see if I can get in here tight enough and see if this can capture what I'm doing without getting my head in the way. Let me move this up here. So this is green brown, which will be a good color to complement this green. I try not to stick with too dark, but I think small cockpit. This will provide some good shadows. But if you can see that, it just kind of zips around with the gloss coat, which is nice. And like I said, we want to minimize the cleanup afterwards. So I just kind of work my way around, adding the shadows. Let's dab a little bit off. I think there's too much on the brush. And just let it zip around the details. So you can see here, wash is applied. It literally just got laid down. So this needs to dry for a couple minutes, probably like 10 minutes. Otherwise, when you do clean it out, if it's too wet, you just wipe the wash away and you have to reapply. So, it's not too stark. It's just subtle enough to, it gives some shadows. This is going to be the main viewing angle from inside the cockpit. So just as long as it gives a little bit of shadow. There's a couple areas that I might need to add a little more wash, but we'll see how it looks after I remove everything. So all the parts here have gotten a wash. They're all ready to go. Here's the side I started with. Looking pretty good. Actually, I need to add some wash to that oxygen hose. If it focuses. Yeah, I need to add some wash to the oxygen hose that I made. And then the floorboard got a start. Like I said, we're gonna get some dusting going over the top of that. So, and then the seat got a combination of gray and the green wash. The gray's up in this top armor area, and then some parts on the buckles, and then the control stick got the dark green color. So pop those details pretty well. So yeah, just gonna let those dry, then we'll start removing the excess wash. Okay, so while the wash was drying, I completed basic assembly of the instrument panel. Got that kind of small panel in the middle situated, and then I added a bunch of these very tiny photo etch levers that are painted red and yellow.
Luckily, Eduard gives you a few extras. I lost one. They gave me 4, so I call that a success. And then there's 2 of the yellow handle, and then this kind of like square black handle. There's a couple of them, but yeah, so that's pretty much done. This just needs to get a flat coat, and then I will add the instrument glass with some UV curing super glue. I'll do that a little bit later when we kind of do final assembly. So I'll show that process. I've already cleaned up the floorboard here. I used just cotton bud and just kind of wiped over this like graded area, and then moved some stuff around into some corners with those other brushes. But this is basically good for the next step. There's some shadow in there. I can add some dust on it, and then we'll be good to go. So moving on to removing on this, let's kind of give you a little preview of kind of how I do it. It's hard to work on this at this angle because I don't really have the best view. Try to get somewhere here where I can work and show you at the same time. But I'm gonna start with this 01, or sorry, this 1 short brush, and I'm just gonna, like I said, just push the wash into the corners and just move it around. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing here. Just kind of pushing it into the corners, into the ribbing, and then if I need a little bit more of a spot, I can use this and remove some stuff, the wash as well. So like I need to be careful around this oxygen hose. I don't want to knock it loose. I'm just going to use this. You see there's that excess wash kind of floating around there. Still pushing that in the corners, but then I'm just kind of, all the excess I've taken off, I just wipe it off on my paper towel. So I'm just going to be nice and careful, move stuff around, remove what I need to remove, push stuff into corners, and get this all nice and cleaned up and looking good. All right, the wash has been removed, manipulated, and moved around. I mainly used this modified brush that I created, and as I move things around, I also kind of randomly like stipple parts of the wash around to get some kind of like staining on the sidewall, so you can see there's like some little subtle staining at the bottom here. Some areas, like high touch or high traffic when you're in the cockpit, just to kind of make it look a little dirty. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a matte coat to seal everything in. And for that, I'll be using, I'll be using this super clear matte varnish from MRP. I love this stuff. This stuff's great. Another one of those things where you don't want to just blast the stuff down. A nice mist coat does the trick. So I'll be using PS 771. I'm gonna grab a glove here because I've chopped these popsicle sticks down, so I don't want to flat coat my pan. But yeah, just got a little bit in the color cup here. I'm just gonna start, zoom out here. So yeah, nice and dead flat. It does a pretty good job. Even on the silver, still a little bit of a sheen, but it really flattens everything out and blends everything together. So that's looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. It's pretty nice and flat. Some good staining in there, making it look dirty. The floorboard here. So yeah, nice and flat. Also need to flatten down the control stick. And then the seat. So that's looking pretty good. I was worried about the shine on the Alclad being a little too strong, but that matte coat definitely helped knock it down. So that's looking pretty good. Nice and protected. The one thing I've learned with using Eduard Photo Etch is I don't like their, graininess that's in
mostly of their older stuff. There's definitely a graininess. What I've noticed, if you lay a flat coat on it, that graininess kind of disappears. Not completely. You can still see it up close, but this helps. So I'm going to go matte coat this entire piece from all the angles I can. And then we'll come back in a little bit and we'll add the glass dials, which will be the final touch of this instrument panel. So that's nice, and you can't see it because there's stuff behind it. But add a flat coat to that. That looks pretty good. So that's looking pretty awesome. Okay, I started on the floorboard, but I realized I didn't hit the record button. So basically, just kind of to roll back here, instead of using this stuff, I decided to use this Mr. Hobby, Mr. Weathering Color. I think it's supposed to say Sandy Wash, but it says Sunday Wash. And I applied it to the cockpit floor to kind of give it this dusty appearance. And basically the way I did that was I got a little bit on this brush, and then I just kind of like randomly put dots all over. It's kind of like oil dots. Laid them around, and then I took this Deerfoot stippler, and then I just kind of patted it around and moved it around. And then after I got kind of like a nice, you kind of see it here. It's kind of grainy, adds a little tan tint to it. I went into a little bit heavier wash, and that's what I was kind of wrapping up doing here when I realized I didn't hit the record button. You don't need a ton of this stuff, but I'll zoom in here. So I just have a little bit on the brush, and I'm in the areas where feet would be the most, I'm adding more of it. I'm just kind of tapping it around, getting some like this kind of dusty deposit type look, especially in these recessed areas underneath feet and in areas that would, this back area right here. Let me sure I'm in the frame here. Sure, you're not going to see this area, but it allows you to work yourself around. And then up the sides are like this little I don't know what this lever's for. You can't probably see it in this angle. But just kind of getting some dust at the base of that. And then since it's all laid out, take the Deerfoot stippler, and then I'm just going to move that around. And then adds a nice kind of dusty appearance to the bottom of the cockpit. So yeah, I really like up there. It's got that kind of accumulation of dust underneath those like footrests, and then a little bit in those recessed ribs. It looks dusty, and you got a little bit of the old wash showing through. I'm actually going to add a little bit of random heavy spots like that. This stuff. Anyways, overnight, I let the cockpit kind of just chill, and I'm pretty happy with the results. It looks lived in, it's dusty. The dust effects from Mr. Weathering Color, Sunday Wash worked pretty well. Seats looking good. So I can pretty much call the sidewall cockpit floor done.
I still need to play around with assembling it and make sure it fits in the fuselage correctly. It's a little finicky to work with. I have to kind of work on that off screen, but I'm going to call the painting and weathering of the actual cockpit itself done for now. So the only kind of real thing left is to detail up and not really detail up, weather in the instrument panel, like that compass on the top, the big kind of black bulgy thing, it just looks too new. And then put a little bit of wear marks around it, and then I'm going to add in the glass dials with some UV curing resin. So I'm going to clear everything off. I'm going to try to show you how I go about applying this UV resin. But before that, I'm going to go and add some light chipping. I'm probably just going to use a pencil, a silver pencil, and move around. And then I'll try to weather in this compass, maybe a little bit of dry brushing. So give me a minute and I will come back. And hopefully this will be kind of the last part of the cockpit build. So let's get to it. Like I said, I'm going to use this brush. I have a little bit of Vallejo neutral gray right here. And I'm just going to get that, and it's going to be my dry brush color. So I'm going to load up my brush. Take most of this off. I'll zoom out a little bit here. Taking the majority of this off. Then I'll try to do this. Let's start on that. Compass first. This is going to need a ton of it because it is right there. Okay, and then so that got the compass. I don't know if this will be able to come through, but it's just a light dry brush. It brings out some of the edges, and then there's a circular part where you look in to see the compass. I'll add a little bit of clear gloss in that later to add it so it looks like glass. So I'm just going to go very lightly and let the bristles of the brush do the work here. And then for the next part, I'm just going to use, to show some, a little bit more wear, is one of these Prismacolor pencils. This is metallic silver. And this, make sure you have a matte coat down when you use this so it kind of sticks. And like I said, so make sure I'm in frame here. Just kind of lightly tap. Make sure you have a good sharp edge when you do this, or sharp point, that is. I'm just going to get a little bit of wear. I'm not going to go all the way around, but just a couple little taps. Ooh, it's not one of those photo etch pieces. That was scary. Get a little bit in here. But yeah, just added a little bit of silver chipping along this edge right here. In here, it's hard to see. Get a little bit right there. Okay, so to add that glass, the inch panel, or the glass effect, I'm using this UV curing super glue. This is thin. I got this from a fly fishing shop that's around the corner from my house, a couple blocks away. And this stuff's pretty cool because you lay it down, you use one of these UV flashlights, and it cures over and solidifies completely clear. Now, it will kind of cook it off initially, but then within 24 hours it'll be completely hard because it is resin, but the UV cures it out. And gives you that glass effect. Yeah, this is gonna be tough to do on camera, but I will try. Okay, so I got a little dollop of this on the tip there. I'm just gonna try to get this fake horizon. I don't know if that showed up, but there's a little bit of a glint on there where I got it in there. Get a little bit more super glue. I messed that up. A little bit too much on that center gauge. So, yeah. I'm gonna have to wipe some of this off. And you can do it. You can wipe it off. Let me find one of these micro brushes.
So
Okay, I'm just gonna go do all these bezels off camera so I can actually do it properly, and then I'll show you about using the flashlight. So I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so coming back, if you can see, there's a little bit of a glint. Or you can see the two center ones, I got too much glue on there and I missed. So what I'm gonna do is I will cook this out and get it curing, and then what I'll do is I'll use a small brush with some flat and I'll remedy that. So all you gotta do is lay this thing down, get your flashlight. I'm gonna move this excess glue out of here, and then you just kind of hold it down and you let it cook the stuff down. You just gotta hold it down for a couple seconds. Get it from a couple angles. There we go. So you can see here, you get that glass effect look. Like I said, I have to fix that center part. That's a boo-boo on my part. Added a little bit too much resin to the compass, so I need to add some flat to that too. So I'm gonna go add that flat, and I'll come back and show you the end results after fixing it up. Okay, so I went in with some of this MRP matte super clear. Even though this says it's for airbrush, you can use this stuff on a fine brush, lay it down, and then, you know, hit it real quick with a hairdryer, and it mats out pretty well. You know, I probably should have just done the application of this off camera, but I was able to fix some of the mistakes. It's not as glossy in the middle there now, but you still get the dial, and it's going to be viewed basically from that angle. So I don't even know how much of it you'll actually see. So kind of a fail on my part, but I think you get the gist of how you can do it yourself if you want to do it. Just make sure you're doing it at a good angle where you can do it successfully. So that's kind of the last part of the cockpit. So that kind of wraps this up. But otherwise, we are moving on to kind of the major assembly of the airframe from here. So yeah, I'll catch you up in the next episode.